I'd like to welcome all of you. My name is David Harris, and I'm the CEO of Prosperident, and I am thrilled to have one of our terrific team members with me today. Her name is Amber Weber. Amber's from Texas, and in a minute I'll ask her to just tell you a little bit about herself. A few preliminary things just as we get started. Time for this should be around an hour, and we've thought that we'll take questions and answers for about 15 minutes after that, but we're also not in a big rush to leave, so if the questions keep coming, we'll be happy to be here and keep answering them. We're going to mention some companies today, you know, as part of your toolbox, and I want to be clear that we have no financial interest in any of those companies except one, which is Prosperident. So if we do mention any, it's simply because we've seen their products or their work and feel good about them. We're going to be giving some stuff away as kind of toolbox items. Most of the things that we're giving away will come from our web store. I think I totaled up the value of the giveaways today is about $415. So at 4:15 p.m. Eastern time or thereabouts, you'll get an email. The email will have some buttons on it that you can click, and clicking on those buttons will take you to the various giveaway items. We're going to have a webinar a week from today at the same time, so Wednesday, April 15th, where we'll be focusing a little more tightly in on embezzlement. And to sign up for that, there will also be a button for that on that email that you get at 4:15. The session is being recorded. It will be available on YouTube. We will have the link probably Friday, and we'll send you out an email that just gives you that link. And finally, you can see my book on in the background of the slide, and here it is here. The book is called Embezzlement, the Art of Dental Embezzlement, the Art of Theft and the Science of Control. We did a giveaway where we offered some books to certain people if they registered. The giveaway was for the first 20 registrants. We ended up expanding that to 60 books, so we've given away 60 of them. That pretty much depletes our inventory here. So if you weren't on that list and you'd like the book, you can get it on Amazon. And what we're going to do for the month of April, because we know that the COVID crisis is causing some people to have what I'd call food insecurity. So all the royalties from every book sold in April, from anybody here and anybody else that buys one, will be donated to the food bank. Amber, why don't you tell the audience just a little bit about you, and let's hear your story.
Okay, that's great. I was born and raised on a cattle ranch in Wyoming, so that really brought in where I got into the business side of everything. I was a clinical hygienist for over 13 years, and I also spent 11 of those years doing administrative and office management in an office. From that, I branched out into coaching and consulting because I loved helping the business side of dentistry grow and focused on, you know, building strong hygiene departments. My first client as a consultant is where embezzlement occurred, and it gave me a whole new perspective on the business side of dentistry and a whole new knowledge of why systems and structures are needed inside of dentistry. And through that, I helped that office with that without knowledge of that, and come to know you, Dave, and got a passion for embezzlement and fraud and employee dishonesty. I still do continue to do consulting, and then I also want to help offices have those systems and structures in place to prevent things from happening.
And Amber didn't know this part was coming. It's not very often that we get to announce a promotion in front of 300 and something odd people, but today's the day for Amber. Her title until a minute ago was fraud examiner, and as of now she is senior fraud examiner, Amber Weber. So Congratulations, Amber. Like I say, normally we just do it in a company meeting, and it's 25 people,
Yeah.
but great to do it. Amber does terrific work for us, and we're really lucky to have her. Thanks for the introduction. Really, what we're dealing with today is this question. Most of you are probably seeing a couple of patients a day right now for stuff that really can't wait. And you have a lot of time on your hands, and you can watch Netflix, you can play video games, you can torment your spouse and work towards a divorce, or you can work on your practice. And I know there's a lot of information out there about what you can do. From our perspective, which is maybe a little different than where a lot of people come from on this, we're going to give you some ideas of what you can do in your practice.
So this goes back to, the silver lining. One of the things that when all of this COVID crisis happened that come to my mind was every cloud has a silver lining. So we always know that after a storm hits, we have to figure out how we can make this a positive outcome. And so I know through our conversations, Dave, with Prosperident and our team, we wanted to reach out and help people turn this into a silver lining for the dentistry world.
Let's talk about the post-COVID world for a minute. A lot is different right now. And my feeling is some things aren't ever going to go back to the way they were. I'm not sure that we're ever going to shake people's hands again, at least without a lot of trepidation. So there are going to be social changes, and there are going to be a lot of structural changes. Just a couple of small examples come to my mind, but there are probably bigger ones. We've had this in Canada for a while, but it's kind of been emerging in the US in the past couple of years. And it's where you can take your credit card and tap it on a terminal in order to pay instead of having the card swiped or inserting it and entering a PIN code. And the limit here for doing that was always $100. In other words, if you bought something that was more than $100, then you had to insert the card. And what somebody somewhere has figured out is that that tapping is much more hygienic. In other words, there's a lot less contact than inserting your card and putting your fingers all over that keypad that nowadays somebody has to wipe down immediately after. So what the companies that offer the merchant services have done is they've all raised the limit from $100 to $250 because they were under pressure from stores to do that. That's never going to go back. Once the COVID crisis has come and gone, that limit's going to stay at $250. Another one that strikes me here is that insurance companies here have never paid medical doctors for telephone consults. That is just something here they never ever did. And suddenly it's okay. Now most medical doctors, my sister-in-law is a family physician here. Most of her consulting right now is done via telephone. And of course the insurance companies, at least right now, are paying for it. I don't see that genie getting back into the bottle either. So a lot of stuff's going to change. This is the part that I don't think has been talked about enough in dentistry. There's a fundamental difference between dentistry and a lot of the other businesses that right now are in some kind of enforced shutdown. And here where I live, which is Halifax, Canada, we're in a virtual total shutdown. So restaurants, for example, are closed except for takeout business only. So a lot of restaurants that really weren't set up to do takeout have just shut their doors. And for other restaurants that is takeout only, you're not allowed right now to sit in a seat in a restaurant. So right now, restaurants and dental practices here are in the same position. They basically have no or no money coming in or very little. Here's the difference though. If tonight, normally I would eat out and I can't, I still eat. So I do it at home or I get takeout. But the restaurant that is shut today because they don't have a takeout part of their business loses the money they would get tonight forever. It's a little bit different with dentistry. The dentistry that people need today, they're still going to need in a month. In fact, in some cases, they're probably going to need it more. So it's not a complete restoration later. I mean, there are some things that really won't get done. For example, if a patient needs work today who passes away, that work won't be done. And it's a little bit different with hygiene, but the vast majority of the work in most of your offices is still going to need to be done when you are in a position to offer the services. So for dentistry, as opposed to the restaurant, what we're really talking about is more in the nature of a timing difference than a complete loss of revenue. As I say, that restaurant that's closed tonight, that revenue gets lost forever. It's never coming back. We're in a little better position in this industry. And as I say, it's really just timing. And as long as you're well enough financed, or there's some way to get you through to the point where money starts coming back in, 3 years from now, you should be in exactly the same place you would have been, give or take a little bit, as if there were no such thing as COVID. I can't say the same for the restaurant owner. I had mentioned just while we were waiting to start that my friend Bill Holt from OrthoBank is here in the audience today. So OrthoBank is a company that does payment management for orthodontists. So when patients are in orthodontic treatment, typically they're paying something each month. OrthoBank collects all that money for orthodontists and then pays them kind of one bulk amount. What they provide here is a really interesting barometer on the economy. So OrthoBank has about 400,000 patients or their responsible parties making payments each month. And what Bill Holt has told me is that approximately 0.5% of those people so far have contacted OrthoBank and asked for payments to be postponed. That is a lot better than I think most people would have expected. Bill has said that he said to me in an email the other day, some orthodontists have gone to him and asked OrthoBank to stop payment for all their patients. And Bill's response was, that's really more than what's necessary. We have this picture of closed businesses and closed stores, and really that there's nobody in the economy with money, and clearly what OrthoBank statistics are showing us is that's not exactly true. The other thing I'll mention that sometimes people don't think about is right now there are a lot of people in the economy who are kind of building up cash. And let's imagine that you work for the government. So you're still getting your salary. And beyond that, some of the places where you would normally spend it aren't available to you right now. So you're not eating out. You're certainly not getting on an airplane and going on a trip. And this certainly doesn't apply to everybody, but there are parts of the economy where people have more money than they normally did. We can say this about all businesses, including dental offices. Some businesses are not going to survive what's going on right now. The head of the local restaurant association here estimated that 20% of the restaurants that are closed right now, where I live, aren't going to reopen. And when you think about the restaurant business is a very tough one. It's easy to get into. Customers are notoriously fickle. Like, it's a very tough business anyway. But some of them aren't going to reopen. There are probably some dental practices that are kind of living on the edge, more or less. And some of those probably aren't going to make it either. And we feel bad for those people. But for the rest of us, we also shouldn't be oblivious to the opportunities that this creates. The first thing that comes to my mind is that it's going to get a lot easier to get good people as staff. One of the things I've consistently heard from dentists over the last 5 years, when the economy has been pretty good, is it's really hard to find good staff. You know, we'll put an ad out there and we'll get 2 responses. And when we hire, we end up just picking whichever of those we dislike the least. That's going to change. There are going to be lots of good people, some coming from dentistry and some coming from other fields, who are suddenly going to be looking for work. And to me, one of the big positives is the ability to have a little more choice when we make picks for staff. Amber, I think you're going to say a few words on this.
Well, because I was a clinical hygienist for over 13 years, a lot of fellow colleagues, former people that I worked with in the clinical side, there's a lot of fear about what the new regulations will be on infection control. There's fear about, will the patients be afraid to come see us? Will we be afraid to see the patients? So that's one of the things that you and I had talked about, Dave, that there's going to be a lot of chaos and fear in staff and patients. So the opportunity now to get the systems and structures in place for the future to deal with these type of things is key.
Thank you. Absolutely it is, I think. And the most important part of this is awareness. We all know that patients or staff may not verbalize this fear. So the message for the audience, I think, is, you know, you have to recognize this and understand that it's there, whether people feel comfortable coming to you and saying it or not. You know, we need to assure people, everybody from staff to patients, that, you know, dentistry is safe and that we have taken a lot of precautions always, but even more now based on COVID.
Right.
So
talking about that are the things, you know, that we can do now. Like we were talking, this is the perfect opportunity to look at that silver lining and all the things that you haven't had time because you've been treating patients and focusing on the procedures that you can complete. Now we want to talk about what you can do to protect the business integrity of your practice. This is a very common knowledge thing, but the number one is help with your current cash flow. As a consultant, we call this the low-hanging fruit, the opportunities that maybe you could be missing. Number one, look at your outstanding insurance. This is for procedures that you've already completed prior to COVID. If you still have staff involved, it's a great opportunity to give them something to work on. If you don't, this is a great opportunity to ask companies who can continue to do this from you remotely, such as EAssist and other companies. But this is what I tell clients to focus on is this is money you already earned, so don't let it go. And now that you have the downtime, really learn that as an owner or a manager or a staff member, how you can contribute to recovering old money.
And Amber, maybe I should just mention, because you mentioned the name EAssist, and there are some other companies that do this as well, but we've certainly worked and had good experience with EAssist. EAssist is a company for outsourcing insurance claim processing and follow-up, and it's grown to be a very big company. The CEO, Dr. James Anderson, is actually in the audience today, and I'll say hi to James right now. But they take one of the most technical aspects of what your front desk does and allow you to outsource it. So it's a very interesting resource. And one of the things that they can help with is a situation where your unpaid claims are a bit of a mess. So I'll just elaborate a little bit. Sorry, Amber.
That's perfect. And I'll add to that, I think this is a great learning experience too, because at the end of the day or the end of the week, after you've seen 10 patients a day, the last thing you have time to do is really focus on the money that could be out there. So utilizing a third party to help you with that, or to staff that you have, is a great opportunity for that. Also, this is another opportunity to focus on your accounts receivable, how big it is, who owes you money, and start really getting a system developed on how you want to clean that up or get a good structure involved with your staff and your practice to keep your accounts receivable healthy. Because post-COVID, once we get through all of this, that's something that's your business is really going to rely on, is having a good, thorough knowledge of your accounts receivable and how you're going to process that and make sure there's a good structure there. From a clinical standpoint, as a hygienist, when I think about this, treatment pending, patients that we couldn't take care of because we were shut down, or patients before we had this downtime that we felt were on our priority list. This is the perfect time to really focus on those and figure out how you're going to continue to take care of those on top of the ones who will be wanting to get in post-COVID. And then as a team, with your team and yourself, you know, get a list involved on how you're going to get these procedures involved, your list, your accounts receivable, what team members you want to help. Get this on a daily, weekly system to keep your practice, the business side of your practice, continuing to thrive and survive during the downtime and immediately after. And I know, Dave, you had mentioned the triage thing, you know, would you like to talk about that?
It goes, I would, thank you, Amber. It goes back to what I said earlier about the dentistry that people need today is still going to be there in a month. Mm-hmm. When people open up, they're going to be very busy, and the most precious resource suddenly in a lot of practices is going to be that dental chair. And, you know, it's important that you appreciate the scarcity that chair is going to carry with it, and, you know, allocate the right people. This is a time probably when you reopen, when doing that single filling may not be as important as getting to somebody else's quadrant or discomfort. So right. It requires a little bit of a rethought for a while, at least until you've reaccommodated the people who were displaced by this. Right.
The other thing that we talked about with help with the cash flow is because there is going to be more need. A lot of practices, I would start setting a strategy. Are you going to be open on some Fridays, some Saturdays? One thing that I've heard from colleagues and previous patients of mine is, I will not be able to take off work to come to the dentist because I missed all of this time with work. How am I going to be taken care of? So I think setting that up as a business strategy that you can take care of these patients at their available time is a key element also.
Oops. Sorry, Amber, I get busy answering questions.
Yep. The other thing is the government assistance. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the different SBA and a lot of things like that going on. Do your research and try to check into that as much as you can and how it will benefit your practice. EAssist also has a great page for this. I'd also check with who is helping you with your practice. There's a lot of knowledge out there about this, and I would really look into that to keep your practice healthy. This is a big key. Improve your knowledge on patient financing. A lot of you may already offer third-party financing. This is a time to research it and figure out, was it being utilized? Do you feel like patients used it to the benefit of helping your practice? And then also, if you don't offer third-party financing, is this something that you can help with patients in the future be able to continue to contribute to their oral health? Post-COVID or not, people are still going to need to keep their oral health important. So this is something I'd really look at your practice. What are the financing options that you're going to have for patients once those doors open? That will be a big question that your staff is going to get asked, your team. And I think as a group, you guys need to have that structure down so that you can answer those questions on day one when you start seeing patients again. And the other great thing is review your merchant service agreements. This is a perfect time to try to renegotiate what your fees would be. You have time to do the research and make sure that, you know, you can make it as doable for your practice once your doors open. So I'd really be looking into all of those, you know, how you process your credit cards, what your agreement is with those companies. And number one, don't stop your marketing and don't stop your communication with your patients. As we talked previously, patients and team members are going to be nervous, fearful, have some anxiety. The more we can personally communicate with these people and know that we're still here and we're still human, I think that's going to be a key element. So continue that conversation with your patients and let them know, you know, once you figure out this third-party financing that I just talked about and you have some new improvements, send that out in a patient newsletter. Let your patients know, you know, we're excited to offer new services to you once the door opens. Yeah.
Great idea.
This is a great thing that I think for all practices, but make a digital difference. A lot of practice software now, you can accept merchant payments directly through the software. So it'll eliminate your need for paper and the terminals to print off for the patients. The reason this digital difference is a big key indicator is infection control. The less paper that we have to deal with patients and the staff, the more it will help them out. So really start to go as digital as you can. Increasing the contactlessness, that's kind of a confusing word to say, but as I just mentioned, it's more hygienic for the patients and your team member, ecologically friendly and cost efficient. Another great thing about this is the scheduling portion. You're going to be bombarded, or there's going to be a lot of phone calls, questions. Your staff and your team members are going to be constantly catering to patients and their needs. And a key indicator, if you can allow these patients to schedule these appointments online for those days and those hours that you strategized your new structure for your business format, it's going to make things flow from a business side so much more convenient for you, your team, and your patients.
It's always, Amber, made me scratch my head. And, you know, most practice management software now will support direct online booking with patients. And if your software won't, there are add-ons that will. But it always drove me crazy that, you know, I could book an airplane ticket across the country online, but I couldn't book a 45-minute cleaning.
Right.
And, you know, if you're not equipped right now to let patients do that, this is a great time to get started. And as Amber says, when you start opening up extra hours and people are kind of fighting for them, it's a whole lot easier if they can just self-book as opposed to requiring every single appointment to have staff time.
And one thing I'll add to that too, Dave, is also filling out their medical history. Make sure, you know, a lot of the software will do that. They can fill out their medical history because post-COVID, you're going to want to know what's going on with those patients, and you'll be able to do that through your website, through digital iPads. Many different types of software offer that. In my experience, I use the Appy, and that would allow patients to schedule online. They could fill out all their medical history updates on the website or in the office through a digital iPad. You can even do online payment options for your patients. So I think the more digital difference you can make, the more convenient it will be across the board. That's a key indicator.
It's convenient and it's also safe. If somebody can complete their health questionnaire at home, you know, that saves the pen being touched and the clipboard being touched and the piece of paper being touched and all of those things that are challenging to disinfect. So yeah, contactlessness is going to be a key word. Our colleague Debbie Long had said the other day that she wonders if in the long term dental practices are going to have waiting areas. Or if it's going to be like the way some restaurants work now, where basically when the doctor's ready to see you or 5 minutes before, you'll get paged on, you'll get a text on your cell phone, or you'll get paged somehow, as opposed to having a whole bunch of people sitting there and exchanging vapors with each other in a waiting room.
Yeah.
So, you know, the dental office of the future is going to be a little bit different. I'll talk about a few other things that we can do constructively. And it's time for me to scold my audience a little bit. Most dentists understand the very direct linkage between their handpiece and their financial well-being. Your practice management software is several times as important to your financial well-being. And yet, for many dentists, that software may as well be written in some foreign language. As a group, the amount of knowledge you have, and there are exceptions, but the amount of knowledge as a group that you have about that software is shockingly low. And one of the big reasons why dentists get embezzled with the frequency that they do, and I'm going to talk about that more specifically in a few minutes, is because of a total unfamiliarity with the software. So now's a great time to learn. A few specific things I would suggest you look at. The first question is a very simple one. Are you using the current version of your software? Most major software issues an update about once a year. Sometimes people refuse those updates, and there are a lot of reasons why. It could be everything from, you know, we need to upgrade our hardware to use that new version of the software, to a staff member who's stealing and resists upgrades because they're not sure if the upgrade is going to shut down whatever game they're playing in that version of the software. In general, newer versions of the software are more secure, they're more user-friendly, and they offer some features that can protect you. So check and see if it's the current version. Normally in your software, there's a main menu. You know, it looks like most other programs that you're used to working with. There's typically a menu item that says About or Help. Normally it's on the far right side, and somewhere in there it will tell you what version it is. So you can find out what version you're using, and you can check on your software's website to see what the current version is. If they're different, let's get an update done. There aren't many good reasons for using an older version of your software. The next thing I want you to do in practice management software is I want you to change your own password. A lot of dentists fall into that really bad habit that the password they're using now is the same one they used 8 years ago when they bought the practice. And that means, among other things, that all your staff know that password. So this is a great time to change it. And one of the benefits of that newer version of the software that I talked about is that most of the newer versions will allow you to set a certain setting that will force not only you, but everybody else to change their password periodically. An appropriate interval for everybody to change their passwords is about every 3 months. One other thing that's not on my slide, but it's kind of an interesting exercise to do now that your practices are probably largely empty. Go into the front desk and turn over the keyboards and see what's taped underneath. And you'll find some interesting things like passwords.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great time to look at what are called the user permissions in your software. So the way that software works is that normally the doctor can do anything in the software. The doctor has kind of complete power. And then what everybody else has is some subset of the doctor or the practice owner's permissions. So this is a great time to look at what each of your staff has for user permissions and to ask yourself whether what they have is beyond what they need to do their job. So if my job in your practice is recall coordinator, in other words, I'm phoning people all day to book hygiene appointments, then there are certain things I need to do and other things that I don't need to do. For example, I don't need to make adjustments to patients' accounts. I don't need to write off balances. I don't need to delete people from the database. So this is a really good time to look, and this stuff is all in your software, to look and see what permissions people have and downgrade them if they have more permissions than they need to do their job. The other thing to be really careful of is something called administrator privileges. When somebody has administrator privileges, that allows them to change their own permissions. It also allows them to change anybody else's. And in my mind, that should be confined to practice owners only. Your software has a lot of information in it, and it's pretty useful if you know how to get at it. So one thing to do is get a little bit familiar with the reports that you could print from your software and learn how to print them. And it is springtime, so let's do a little bit of spring cleaning. And some of the things that we might want to get rid of would be old providers who are still in our software. So the dentist you bought the practice from 6 years ago, who has given up their license 5 years ago and isn't practicing anymore, doesn't really need to be showing up as a provider in your practice management software anymore. So once people are totally inactive, let's get rid of them. Sometimes after somebody leaves, we need to keep them around for a little while because their receivables are still being collected, and we need to keep their provider code open for that. But once you get to a certain point and that provider is totally inactive, let's get rid of them. Same for old fee schedules. You know, most insurance companies update a fee schedule every year or so. And sometimes we look in software, you know, there are fee schedules there from 5 years ago that just don't need to be. And when that schedule is there, there's a risk that somebody will bill a fee under the wrong schedule. And of course, normally fee schedules go up, so billing under an old schedule will cost you money. So let's get those cleaned out. One thing I'll mention, and we do have several people here in the audience from the practice management software industry. Now is a really good time if you want to spend some time with a software trainer and learn some of the important features about your software. What these people spend most of their time doing is going to offices and doing group training. Well, there's not a whole lot of that going on right now. So these people have some time on their hands, and if you want to book some one-on-one training, it can be done very easily at a distance. I mean, Zoom, the platform that we're using right now, is great for that. And the software companies are typically set up to do training at a distance. So it's a perfect time for you to get some one-on-one with a software trainer, and you can say to them, I'm not here to learn how to enter appointments, but I do want to learn more about my reports. I want to learn more about the management features in software. And it's a great time to take advantage.
So another great way you can look at your downtime right now is a policy overhaul. What we see in a lot of offices is a lot of people will think they have their policy in place, and sometimes it's just a basic human resources manual. This downtime is going to allow you time to really look at your certain policies outside of vacation, benefits, those type of things. A key indicator that I would use is your business team and your clinical team will have more knowledge on certain policy and processes, specifically how you're going to handle how the day ends. A key indicator of this is, like David, you mentioned, the reports that your owner needs to do and your admin, clinical, and the practice owner. I think the more knowledge that your clinical team has in how these reports affect the business, if they completed procedures correctly, if they're making sure that everything's being done correctly so that the patient and the insurance is filed correctly, this is where you can really get some specific processes down for your team as a whole, and what your role is at the end of the day as a practice owner. You have to be the leader in this and set the structure in the system for your team members so that when you get back from the post-COVID crisis, it's all in writing, and you guys can talk about this is how we're going to handle each day, from the beginning of the day when we talk about our business today and at the end of the day. And each team member is going to play a role in that happening. We're also, as part of today, we're going to be giving away our spreadsheet, that Prosperident that we offer our clients. This is a very usable spreadsheet that will help you walk through how you and your team can use the numbers at the end of the day and make sure everything's being done in a good systemized way to make sure things are being done correctly.
Absolutely. And just a reminder again, you will be getting a follow-up email at approximately the end of the session today. And at that point, we will, there's a button on it that you can click to get this spreadsheet. So it's called our monthly monitoring spreadsheet, and it's pretty easy to use.
Mm-hmm. HIPAA compliance, this is going to be a big time that you can use to review your HIPAA compliance. Reach out to somebody who specializes in HIPAA compliance and get your office up to speed. Some of this may change with the crisis we're going through, but here's the perfect opportunity to make sure that all of that is in place and that your team understands that is in part of your processes manual that we're talking about. Be specific for each process that you need to get in touch with your office. And as we talked, Dave, you know, hiring processes right now this is a crucial time to look at how you're going to hire new team members. Some team members may stay with your practices and some may not. This may be a crucial time that new people are looking for work, and I would recommend cleaning up your current personnel files. All the team members that you have, go through that, make sure that everything's up to date. You've got copies of their current license, and so clean up your personnel files, and also develop a system of how, moving forward, you're going to screen applicants and do new hiring practices in your business.
And let's talk about that. By the way, you're going to see in the background some pictures of embezzlers. And what I'll say generically is that if anybody in the background on one of these screens looks a whole lot like one of your staff members, we really need to talk. In terms of hiring, one thing that has always struck me is how dentistry has allowed itself to get out of step with how the rest of the world hires. And I'm going to lay out for you what I think a proper hiring process is. And while I'm doing this, just mentally compare it to what you do and see if you see any deficiencies. The first thing I tell people to do is, when you're interviewing staff for a position, check their photo ID. Do it then. I know that later on, if you hire them, you often have to verify their identification with photo ID, but do it when you're interviewing somebody. If somebody's trying to hide baggage, one of the ways that they can do it is to use their sibling's identity, for example, or pick some other identity. And when you're interviewing, you should be asking people for a photo ID and another piece of ID, which could be anything, a library card, a gym membership, whatever. But the person who shows up for an interview with none of that is either lying or makes me wonder about them anyway. One place where a lot of dentists fall down is they don't speak with former employers. Your rule should be very simple. Do not hire anybody without talking to everybody they've worked for the past 5 years. The only problem you may run into is that sometimes the person applying for a job doesn't want that to happen. So they may do things like give you a phone number that is supposed to be their former employer, but is actually their uncle on a disposable cell phone. Or they may say to you, please don't contact my current boss because she doesn't know that I'm looking. Now, it may be that they actually were fired 3 weeks ago, and this is their way of averting a conversation between you and somebody who just fired them, who obviously is not going to have good things to say about them. And we need to work through all that stuff. For example, when somebody says that about the former employer, or when somebody says, my current boss doesn't know I'm looking, your response should be, I understand that completely, and I certainly wouldn't want to get you in trouble with your current employer, But I'm going to tell you that we don't hire anybody without speaking with their most recent employer. However, in deference to your situation, I'm prepared to postpone that until the end of the process. And what you just said is a great exercise in differential diagnosis. If somebody's playing games with you, what you just told them is that at the end of their path is a brick wall. On the other hand, if it's a legitimate request and they are still working there and they don't want to get their current employer stirred up, then you've responded with understanding and accommodation. So that's a great way to separate out the people playing games with you. It astounds me that I cannot get a job at FedEx delivering the junk people buy on Amazon without a drug test. And yet I can work at virtually any dental practice in North America. And I guess right now, if we're hiring in the COVID era, we probably need to add another one to this, which is temperature test.
Yeah.
We probably wouldn't want to hire somebody who's got COVID currently. We should be looking at people's credit specifically for the front desk, but also for somebody being hired for a position that might evolve into one where they're handling money. And one thing I'll mention about all of these things is that we need to be interpretive. So the fact that somebody has bad credit doesn't mean we shouldn't hire them. It means that we need to understand why they have bad credit and then decide how much of a risk that presents to our practice. There are a lot of people 6 months from now who are going to have bad credit. And, if somebody has been laid off and their spouse lost his job and there's a little bit of a lag till government money kicks in, that may affect their credit rating. And that probably wouldn't bother me. On the other hand, if I'm looking at hiring somebody to be a financial coordinator and their spouse is a contractor and they live in the big house by the golf course and they have 2 SUVs in the driveway and they have bad credit, that terrifies me. Because that's somebody who's living really well on money they don't have. And sooner or later, they're going to hit the wall financially, and that's when they'll think about taking your money. We need to verify credentials, and we should never assume that a piece of paper that says that somebody's licensed as a dental hygienist in your state is definitive. It's not hard to forge documents. So credential verification involves going directly to the issuing authority and checking. And in most places now, you can do that online. Amber, I know you had a point on this as well.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know what the hidden secrets are of somebody. They have a reason that their license was suspended or anything against them. It can be interesting to see what the reason that they've had issues on their license that are not trustworthy. You wouldn't want that person coming into contact with your clients. So it's always hidden secrets of if they have any suspensions on their license at all.
Yeah, and hidden information is a great concept. Thank you for mentioning that. Really what we're after here is to find out what they don't want to tell us.
Right.
And another key part of that in my mind is the next one, which is social networking scan. In 2020, I will not hire anybody without looking at their social networking activity. You can learn a lot about people by how they handle social networking. Everything from anti-employer sentiment. I mean, the person who you're looking at hiring who's bashing their current employer and complaining about their job is going to be doing that next, but about you. The person who posts when they're supposed to be working is a time thief. And if you hire that person, they're going to be the one who takes a half-hour bathroom break twice a day to catch up with their friends on social media while you are scrambling around and the rest of your staff are doing their work. So there's a lot you can learn about somebody here, and it always surprises me when people don't take advantage of that resource. And the final thing that gets skipped over, and it absolutely should not, is the criminal records check. I'm going to give you a very sobering statistic. 65 million Americans So that's 1 in 4 adults has a criminal record. Now, not every criminal record that somebody has should shut the door to employment with you, but you need to make decisions about people from a position of knowledge. So if somebody has a criminal record, you need to know about that and then decide if it poses a risk. If it was a marijuana conviction 20 years ago in California where it's legal now, that probably wouldn't bother me. But somebody convicted of check fraud 2 years ago, yeah, that's not really somebody I'd want to hire in my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Another good constructive use of downtime is to improve the physical security of your practice. And there are a lot of facets to this. One thing that drives me crazy is when I see somebody who has an alarm system and they're using what I call the Unicode, which means all the staff members and the cleaners you fired 3 years ago all have the exact same alarm code. Really, the way it needs to happen in your practice is everybody needs their own individual code. And what that means is when you let somebody go, it's really easy to cancel their code. If you're using the Unicode, most times people don't bother, or if you did, what you'd have to do is give the new Unicode to everybody. So let's make sure everybody has an individual code, and that also allows us to track who is arming and disarming your alarm. In other words, who's coming into the practice at certain times and who's leaving. This is a great time if you own the building to improve your exterior lighting. One of the big factors in burglary is poor lighting. And if you have, for example, a back door and there's no lighting or there's no motion sensor lighting around it, that provides a really easy ingress for a burglar. I think a really good idea if you have an outside door, in other words, if you're not in an office building somewhere, is to put up a no narcotics on premises sign. A lot of people will assume that you have narcotics, whether that's true or not, and that's one of those magnets that will get them to break into your place. A good time to consider a video system, and you know, obviously outside is a good thing if burglary is a problem. Inside video also makes a lot of sense sometimes. I will mention that very little embezzlement is caught on video, and Amber and I are going to be back in a week talking about embezzlement, and I'll be happy then to talk about why so little of it is caught on video. But in terms of security against outsiders, video is great. This is a really good time, if you're able to do it, to replace lock and key with physical security. And you can see the picture on the screen of a biometric key. These used to be really expensive. They're not anymore. There are a couple of advantages here. First of all, it keeps entry to who really needs to come in. And secondly, they're very difficult to pick. If you look at the lock that's on the door in the background, on the brown door, I'm not the world's best lock picker, but I can probably get in that in about 45 seconds. And you would, I hope, have no reason to know this, but lock picks are a lot easier to use than they used to be. There's a thing called a pick gun. They're about $15, and it'll open that lock very quickly. Whereas the biometric one's a lot tougher to pick. And you can see the biometric key that's here also has a keypad. So if you want to give somebody access, you can also do it by giving them a number as opposed to taking their thumbprint. Another thing to think about in your practice at the front desk is what's called a panic button. So the way this works, it's part of your alarm system. It usually sits under the desk of somebody at the front desk. And if, you know, somebody comes in and it's, let's say, an armed robbery situation, or, you know, somebody who's after narcotics who kind of comes in and rushes the front desk, when somebody pushes this button, it rings at your alarm company, and the alarm company calls the police, and the police usually show up pretty fast. They can either be silent, which means that nobody in the practice will hear it, or you can make it set so that your alarm bell goes off too. Personally, if in a dental practice, I'd probably want the alarm bell to go off, because that's likely to scare the person away who's doing the armed robbery. So I mentioned the panic button is something that I think a lot of people in dental practices don't know is possible, and it certainly is. And the final thing is, this is a really good time to have a look at things like hinges and door hardware. And what I see in a lot of practices, and the one in the background is a good example. These doors open outward. In fact, some building codes require your doors to open outward. And the problem that that creates is that the hinges are on the outside of the door, and you can see it there, the one circle in black. So with most hinges, if you have a hammer and a screwdriver, you can take the hinge apart by lifting what's called the hinge pin out. And once you do that, then the door will open kind of in the reverse way that it normally does. And if you ever have a toddler who's locked himself in the bathroom in your house, this is the way a lot of times you get them out. The problem is that this gives somebody a pretty easy way to get into your practice. If you have hinges like this, the solution is on the screen now. It's that little thing called a set screw. You might have to replace the hinges, or you may be able to sort of retroactively add this screw. But what it does is it stops the pin, which is the thing between the two hinges, from being lifted up. So this is a great time to take a walk around the outside of your practice and see where security needs to be beefed up. I mean, most times the cost of this stuff is very low. You could probably replace all your hinges for about $45 and dramatically increase your physical security. So let's take a walk around the practice. If you know somebody who's in the law enforcement or security business, get them to help you. They may see some things that you don't, but almost every practice I see has room for improving that stuff. A few other things to do, and we're going to talk about embezzlement protection briefly. I mentioned not having Unicodes a minute ago, and where I'm coming from on this is that you can easily ask your alarm company to send you each month the access log, and assuming everybody has unique codes, one of the things that will tell you is if a particular staff member is sneaking into the practice when they shouldn't be. A lot of embezzlers want to be alone when they steal. Second thing is, anybody who's sending a paper statement, get it sent to your house and not the practice. I'd like you to be the first person who sees that stuff. It's a great time to take a look at who has access to online banking. And if you have somebody like a bookkeeper or maybe your office manager with online banking, you can limit them to what's called observer status. And that means that they can't, for example, move money between accounts, or they can't add a new payee to your list of people who can be paid. Observers can check balances. They can see if a certain check has cleared, but they can't actually do transactions. So if you have people with more access than they need, kind of like what Amber said about practice management software, actually, I guess I said that. It's a great time to dial it back. Another good thing to do is what's called the Embezzlement Risk Assessment Questionnaire. And that's something we sell on our website, but it's among our list of giveaways today. And it's very quick. It takes less than 15 minutes, and it's a good way to kind of take the pulse of your practice in terms of embezzlement. I love this kind of picture. This is somebody we were investigating who got the cuffs put on her about 3 weeks ago. And the very best part of this story is that it was done at her attorney's office. I mean, this takedown happened right in front of her attorney. It just doesn't get any better than that. Again, we're going to talk about this more next week, but I'll give you a couple of quick numbers. And the American Dental Association did a study in 2019 and asked a number of questions, including this one: have you been a victim? What's interesting is they did a similar study about 12 years earlier. So we kind of now have a picture of how embezzlement is changing over time. In the 2019 study, what happened was, the good news was that 53% of the respondents said, as far as I know, I haven't been embezzled. Here's the bad news. 26%, so more than a quarter of the people surveyed, said, yeah, I've been stolen from once. 11% twice. 2% 3 times, and here's the one that should floor everybody. 8% of respondents said, yeah, I've been stolen from at least 4 times. If you take the stuff on your left and you double it, that's approximately your lifetime probability of being embezzled. In other words, it's something over 90%. Because the people in the 53% who don't think so have the rest of their careers to be stolen from. And they face about the same probability of being stolen from as everybody else. When we look at the 2007 study, 35% of dentists studied that year reported being embezzled. So it's gone up in 12 years from 35% to 47%. That's really significant, and clearly this is a different form of pandemic. I'll just quickly give you a few other statistics about embezzlement. On average, it goes on undetected in your practice for almost 2 years. When somebody embezzles, on average, they get away with about $109,000. And the typical number of methodologies that a thief uses is 3. In other words, we see very few one-trick ponies. There are 3 preconditions, if you like, that people have for stealing. The first thing that somebody needs is they need to be under some pressure, and sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional. They need to have the opportunity to steal, and what I'm going to say, just as a very simple blanket statement, is that virtually anybody who works at the front end of your practice has the opportunity to steal. And the third component is rationalization. In other words, they need to be able to say to themselves, I know that in general, stealing is wrong, but in this specific case, it's okay because. And then you have that group in the middle right there who have those 3 things. They have that pressure, opportunity, and rationalization, and they're the ones where stealing doesn't have to happen. So I guess the obvious question, okay, yeah, now I messed myself up, Amber. Let me see if I can get on to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, that didn't work well. I'll see if I can fix that while you're talking about this slide.
Okay, sounds great. So, the whole purpose of this is how is COVID going to affect embezzlement? A lot of people are going to think there's a lot more desperate people, and there is. People are going to be a little more fear and have some anxious need for desperation, I guess is the word, stress. But the truth is, well, most of them steal, most likely not. But the takeaway from today is the more system and structure you have for your team and accountability, we can prevent this from happening as easily. Some people who want to be a thief are going to learn how to be a thief and figure it out. But today's purpose was for you to understand during this downtime, get a structure and a system so that you have checks and balances and separation of responsibilities between your team.
Absolutely. And the one thing we need to understand about thieves is that it's a very unequal battle between you and them. And it's really tempting because most dentists are more educated, let's assume, smarter than the people who steal from them. And it's tempting to assume that that's going to give them the upper hand. I'm just going to tell you about a conversation I had with a friend of mine a few years ago that was about something totally different, but it really put embezzlement into context. And the problem that my friend was having was that he has bird feeders in his backyard, and squirrels kept eating his birdseed. So my friend tried everything he could think of, and nothing worked. Finally, in desperation, he did that thing that no male member of the species likes to do. He went into a hardware store and he asked somebody for help. So he went into not Home Depot, but the old-fashioned hardware store in the corner. And he went and he asked the man behind the counter for a squirrel-proof bird feeder. And the man behind the counter said to my friend, "Sir, there's no such thing." Well, my friend wasn't giving up quite yet. He said, you know, there must be a way to keep squirrels out of my birdseed. The guy from the hardware store came around from behind the counter, and actually he put his hand on my friend's shoulder, which is something you probably wouldn't do today. And he said to my friend, "Sir, I'm going to ask you a question here, and I'd like an honest answer." And my friend thought, okay, where's this going? Hand still up on my friend's shoulder. "Sir, how much time each week do you spend thinking about the squirrels eating your birdseed?" And my friend said, "I don't know, 15, 20 minutes probably." The guy from the hardware store said, "Sir, I'd like you to think about this from the squirrel's perspective. Whether the squirrel survives this winter depends on how successful he is at eating your birdseed. So probably he wants to eat that birdseed even more than he wants to have sex with Mrs. Squirrel. Who do you think's going to win here?" Well, I have some video from my friend's backyard, and we're now going to push the very limits of Zoom. Yeah, we've got hundreds of people here, and we're going to see if we can push this video across to all of them. So my fingers are just crossed that it works. This is my friend's backyard, and this thing with the inverted bell is what they sell as a squirrel-proof bird feeder. And you can see what it does. It stops the little squirrel from getting up and around to the birdseed. But the squirrel says, "I'd like to survive the winter." And you know what? That little 4-pound squirrel outsmarting my college-educated friend reminds me of every embezzler I've ever met. Okay, now what do we do, Amber? Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
Whoops. One last giveaway. We have a white paper called How to Beat Embezzlement in Your Practice. And all you have to do is click the link on the email that's going out in about 4 minutes, and it will be all yours.
All right, so we offer ways to help you with this. If you have, after watching today, or you have a fear that maybe some embezzlement has occurred in your practice, you know, definitely contact us. We do embezzlement investigations. We have a great team where we can thoroughly investigate and see if anything is happening or has happened in your practice in the past. We can also give you some professional assistance with our office protection system on how to safeguard embezzlement from occurring in your practice. It's not a guarantee, but it can help you set some systems in place to better protect your business. We do offer some special COVID financial arrangements available to make this doable and easier for you to do as a practice, because we do want to help you make sure that when you open past the post-COVID crisis, that your mind is at ease, that everything has been thoroughly looked at for you.
Absolutely. Again, just a reminder, webinar next week, and it's new insights on embezzlement. And we're going to be talking about a lot of the stuff that came out of that American Dental Association survey last year. And there's a lot of really good information there. And you can register through the follow-up email that is now coming out in a couple of minutes, or we'll send you a direct email on this topic as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing some of your afternoon or morning if you're on the other side of the world with us. And we'll now just take a look at the questions and see which ones we can tackle. And if you have further questions, please feel free. Amber, if you can see the questions as well, take a look and just see if there's anything you want to pick out. All right. Well, what am I gonna know? Yeah, grab one.
Pete, he was wanting to know the best way to look at EFT payments with your bank account, and that's where utilizing that spreadsheet that we're giving you, where you can look at what hit your day in the bank and then your software. One thing I would really recommend is get a system in with your team where you decide when you get the notification on those EFT payments, make sure they're posted to your software in a timely manner. In my experience, we've seen it happen where sometimes it takes several weeks. So that's harder to look at. But definitely feel free to reach out to us and we can help answer that question in more detail for you.
Somebody asked if it's smart to divide duties between people to reduce the chance of embezzlement. Absolutely it is. Sometimes that's not practical. I mean, if you're a small practice and you have one person working at the front desk, it's pretty difficult to divide up duties, but in general, it works. And a risky conversation for somebody who is who wants to embezzle is to go to one of their coworkers who possibly they don't know very well, and you know, say to them, I want to steal from our boss, but I need your help. So that's not you know, that's not a conversation that a lot of thieves would like to have. So that's the theory behind dividing up duties. Of course, where it breaks down is when these two people know each other pretty well. I mean, picture two siblings working in your practice, and that's probably a conversation that one of them could have with the other. So yeah, dividing up duties is a good idea. Asking about, somebody asked if there are some resources for economically background checking people. Yeah, there certainly are. There are several companies out there that will do background checks on people. And when I talk about background checks, I'm using that in the broad sense of the word. In other words, that would include things like credit history check, and if they're going to be driving at all for the practice, like potentially in an orthodontic practice that picks up and drops kids off, looking at a driver's abstract is a good idea. Yes, there are companies that will do that. And I will mention names, but I know I'm forgetting some good companies in this space. One that does it is called Dent Reps. And there are certainly others. Drug testing is something that needs to be done locally. And, you know, almost any city of 50 or 60,000 people or bigger has a lab that will do drug testing. So normally what happens is you make the appointment for the person to show up at the lab. It should really be done with relatively short notice. You know, you don't want to allow somebody 3 weeks notice to sort of clean out of their system whatever they don't want you to find there. So yeah, absolutely. Amber, this is a good one for you. What's the easiest, best way to match EFT payments with bank deposits?
Well, as I said, I would recommend that those payments are posted within a day or two of it hitting your bank deposit. That's the first thing I'd look at, is make sure that that's happening in a timely manner, and that it's included on your end of day report, so you can look at your bank statement and make sure it's being completed that way. That's one of the things.
I may add one other answer. I know that one thing that some offices do that I think is kind of intriguing is they use a separate bank account for bulk deposits. So all the bulk deposits go into a different account,
right,
than the main one, and that gives a that gives an easy way to ensure that those deposits get segregated out from everything else and then reconciled. Just an additional thought.
That's what I was just about to add that, so I'm glad you jumped in and added that. Here's another question about, you know, dental offices don't like the sense of losing the control of their schedule by letting it go online. My experience with the online scheduling opportunity is it does communicate with your software, and you're allowed to pick the times and dates that you want to allow them to schedule online. So it's not just, it doesn't give the patient an option to just schedule whenever they would like. There's certain times that these scheduling options will only allow certain times for people to request a appointment online.
Yeah, great answer. And another question, can we legally ask to check somebody's credit? The answer is yes, with some conditions. First of all, it normally needs to be job related. So if you're hiring somebody to be a sterilization assistant and there's really no potential whatsoever that they would move to a front desk responsibility, it may not be legal in your state. If you're hiring somebody for front desk, office manager, financial coordinator, treatment coordinator, yes, there shouldn't be any problem. What is required is the applicant's written consent for you to do a credit check. In other words, you can't do a credit check without the applicant's consent.
Right.
Oh, here's a nice one. Hey guys, I'm a Patterson rep from San Diego. You put on a program at our education center in 2019. It was one of the best programs I've ever seen. Thank you very much. That's awfully nice. Appreciate that. All right, we covered the EFT question. Somebody asked about patient financing other than care credit, and you have a number of options here. There's another company called Lending Club that does that does patient financing in kind of the same way as care credit. There are also some companies, and I was trying to remember the name of one of them, and I couldn't pull it in. But there are some companies that do sort of what is explicitly a little bit higher risk financing. In other words, care credit and Lending Club tend to take people with decent credit scores. There are some companies that will take less qualified companies. Amber, if you can remember a name, help me out here, because I know they exist, but I just can't pull the handle on it. It's okay.
I know Compassionate Finance is one.
Thank you. Yes, very good. Compassionate Finance.
Yeah.
That was exactly who I was trying to think of. There's also a group who have a system that allows doctors to run their own patient financing program. And, you know, if you're reasonably well capitalized, that's something else that you might want to look at.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody asked what EFT payments are. That's a great question. We should have covered that. EFT means electronic funds transfer. So that's when an insurance company or somebody like Care Credit puts the money directly into your account, as opposed to, say, an insurance company that sends your practice a check, and you end up depositing the check. So EFT, electronic funds transfer. The other terminology you'll hear used for that sometimes is ACH, which means automated clearinghouse. They mean the same thing. ACH is kind of a banking term, and EFT is what most people would call it. But yeah, it's when money shows up automatically in your bank account.
And that ties into your question. One of our participants said, during this downtime, how do we know if our secretaries are properly collecting accounts receivables like insurance checks, etc., and not saying it was lost in the mail? So this is a great time to look at what insurance companies you want to set up the EFT option so that money directly gets put into your bank account. And like Dave said, it's great to have a separate account so it's easier to reconcile and make sure everything's done correctly. Another thing is, a lot of insurance companies, you can log on there and get a report of which claims were processed and what you should have received payment on. So it can give you an idea of that.
Yeah, and I'm going to answer multiple questions that came up here. So I was talking about credit checking and also criminal records checks. One thing that you need to know is that in some states, when you can do those things in the sequence is put down for you. A lot of states, and California is one, are called ban the box states. And what that means is that in California, you cannot do a criminal records check until after you've given somebody a conditional job offer. And what they're trying to prevent, of course, is people being disqualified from jobs sort of peremptorily because they have a criminal record. So if you're in California, you need to go through the whole process, make somebody a written offer and make it subject to a criminal records check, and then do the criminal records check. And what that means is if you end up not hiring that person, it's very explicitly because of the criminal record, because the person was acceptable to you before you found out that they had the criminal record. Now, every dental practice deals with vulnerable populations. You have seniors, you have children, you have people with various learning issues, and it is totally okay to disqualify somebody because of previous criminal activity. It's just that it has to be sequenced appropriately. And I'll say exactly the same thing about checking somebody's credit history. In certain jurisdictions, you are required to do that as part of a contingent job offer. That's just sequencing. You know, the real issue in most practices is that they have, they just don't really know the people they're hiring as well as they should. Another great question, is electronic funds transfer less likely to be embezzled than physical checks? It's not either or. First of all, every practice is going to have both. I mean, there's no such thing as 100% EFT. There's no practice I've ever seen that has nobody paying over the counter. Thieves steal a certain amount, you know, they have a goal, they have an amount of money that they need to or want to steal, and they'll find it. Whether your practice gets 60% of its revenue through electronic funds transfer or it gets 20% doesn't make a lot of difference. So I'll say no, EFT isn't going to save you. The question somebody asked is, what is the name of a good company for online appointment booking and online payments? I think Amber gave you the name Yappy. Yappy is owned by a dentist, and her name's Dr. Gina Dorfman. There are certainly other companies in that space as well, but yeah, there are lots of them. And in my mind, you are crazy in 2020 not to let patients directly book appointments. Yeah. I do accept what somebody said about it means losing a little bit of control over your appointment book. There are lots of ways to get that back. For example, your practice management software will often let you set up some kind of block booking template where you'll only allow certain things at certain times. You know, you'll have certain times reserved for new patients and stuff like that. That's probably control you can retain if you work at it a little bit.
Yeah.
Ritu, you asked, can you spell the online site? And I'm not sure which site you mean. If it's our online site, it's dentalembezzlement.com. If it's somebody else's, just message us back. And Tabitha mentioned Local Med is another company that does online scheduling system. And yeah, thank you. That's a good piece of knowledge. And Local Med is now owned by a company called Dental Intel that do some really interesting things for practices. So I'd, you know, that's certainly another one looking into. Oh, okay. Ritu just qualified the online booking site. I believe it is yapi.com.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are companies that do it. It's just I have used that one. Revenue Well's another one. Like you said, Dental Intel, NPI. There's several out there that will offer you to become more digital.
Okay. Kathy says NPI, which is New Patients Inc., provides online bookings. I didn't know that, but I mean, I know who New Patients Inc. are, and they've been around for a long time. Thank you, Kathy. That's great information. And Holly gave us another company doing financing called Green Sky. But her comment was more difficult to use, but it's an option. Okay, good to know. Holly, do they do sort of the higher risk end? Because I think that's something that's going to be of more interest. And if you have a chance to message us again, that would be great. Peter asked, is there a delay from between when EFT, electronic funds transfers, go into a bank and when the practice gets noticed? And their answer is yes, there is normally a delay. In other words, the money is normally in your account before you know about it. Right. And that's what we call a timing difference. The other timing difference is when people pay by credit cards, where the opposite happens. Typically, the practice when a patient pays you by credit card today, the practice records it today, but it doesn't hit your bank account for a couple of days. So both of those are timing differences. And Amber mentioned the monthly monitoring spreadsheet. That's one of our bonus materials. And a lot of what it helps you do is do the balancing that has to happen while taking into account these timing differences.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody asked about favorite cloud-based practice management software. That's a bit of a minefield. There are now a lot more choices than there used to be, and I'll just talk about general dentistry. You know, specialized stuff like orthodontics has a number of cloud options. In the general dental space, there are really, in my mind, 3 leading contenders, and there are probably some other emerging softwares that also have some advantages. But there is both Henry Schein and Patterson Dental, so the people who make Dentrix and EagleSoft, each have a cloud software, and these are big companies, and it's well supported, and they have good training forces. There is also one company that only makes a cloud software and nothing else. It's called Curve Dental, and the software is called Hero. You know, I think they each have some strengths, and I would certainly give those 3 a look. And as I say, there are some new emerging entrants. Amber, I'm not sure if there's anything else in the cloud that you can see that you want to highlight. Dentrix is called Ascend, and Patterson's is called Fuse, I think, going from memory. Again, both are going to be well developed, well documented, well researched softwares. So all good. Sorry, Amber, you were about to say something?
No, I said I haven't researched yet if Open Dental is doing anything cloud-based. At this time, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they don't have cloud software now that I'm aware of. I haven't asked them directly if they're working on it, but I'd be astounded if they weren't.
Right.
Somebody just put in a really strong plug for local med and revenue well, so good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Holly was somebody who mentioned Green Sky as patient financing. She said a couple of things. My staff don't like it as much as Care Credit, and it seems like their reporting may not be as good. So yeah, some good stuff there. Okay, Peter says Open Dental is not cloud yet. Yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Great.
Okay, we'll take maybe 3 more questions and then call it a day, because we're a little over time, but there are so many good questions that I just hate to walk away. Somebody asked if there's a specific brand you recommend for a biometric key. I don't. I mean, there are several companies in the like Weiser and Schlag in the lock business, and they've been there forever, and they're the people who supply the biometric stuff. Okay, somebody asked about electronic funds transfers, and the question is if the notification is received from insurance, then it should be posted in the bank account no matter what. I don't quite understand the question. I mean, yeah, assuming that the things work as they're supposed to, the money should go right into your bank account. If there's a glitch at your bank, which has happened. I mean, it's even happened when we've tried to pay people, and Amber, not to single anybody out, but we sent Amber's paycheck to her bank one day and they sent it back.
Yeah.
And that caused a little consternation. You may have noticed that banks don't always hire people the same week NASA fires its rocket scientists. I'll say that generally. All right, I said 3 questions, and that was one. Somebody just said Open Dental does have a cloud option. Okay, we have a little debate going here. Obviously, I'll check that out with Open Dental. We haven't seen it yet, but it's great if it's there. A lot of people like Open Dental software for a lot of reasons. So I think if they have a cloud product, that would be good news for a lot of people. This is a great COVID sort of question. I would like my employee to work from home. However, I'm hesitant to give them remote access. Is there a safe way to do it? Should we avoid this at all costs? You know, in general, in a non-COVID world, I would say my preference would be not to give employees remote access. I think the practice owner should have it, but nobody else should. However, there's just no way that's workable right now. So I think as an exception to the general principle, right now, home access is okay. Get your IT people to set it up so that it's secure. And HIPAA is going to require a certain type of connection called a VPN or virtual private network. You know, some of the commercial or freeware stuff out there, like there's one way called TeamViewer that you can connect, and I'm not positive that using TeamViewer would be HIPAA compliant. So you need to work that out with your IT people in terms of HIPAA compliance. But I'm certainly in a situation right now where what I would recommend in other times I don't agree with for right now. Amber, I will give you the honor of picking the last question. Oh, somebody asked how we get you back to San Diego to speak. I'd love to come to San Diego. Email me later, and we'd love to set it up.
Well, someone had a question of who does what on your team picture. So that would be a great one for you to take, Dave, to answer, so that everybody who's in here understands who our team is and what everyone does.
Absolutely. Yeah, great one to close on. We have a total of about 25 people. First of all, I think most of you know this, but I'll say it anyway. We only work with dentistry. We don't support any other community. Dentistry is it. So we have about 25 people in total. You can see a picture that was taken of some of us last summer, and you can all pick Amber and me out. And I don't know how we did this, Amber, but we ended up with all the blonde ladies on the outside and all the brunette ladies on the inside. That was no planning whatsoever. But yeah, we're about 25 people in total. Dentistry is the commonality. So almost all of us have a dental background, and you already know that Amber was first a hygienist, and then an office manager, and then a consultant, and then worked for us. About 50% of our investigators used to be dentists, and the rest come from some other corner of dentistry. So they were office managers or consultants or software trainers or something in the dental world. And then we have our IT staff. But yeah, dentistry is the background for all of us. About half of our investigators have a designation called CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner. Amber's working on hers currently. We don't hire accountants or people with law enforcement backgrounds in general, because for them to learn what they need to know about dentistry is just prohibitive. It's much easier to take people who understand dentistry already and teach them about how to be investigators. I also mentioned somebody early on named Wendy Askins. Actually, I'll try my luck with the pen again and just see how it works. Whoops. All right. Yeah, that's Wendy Askins right there. She heads our orthodontic investigation department, which is a specialized group within Prosperident. So when we deal with orthodontists, their software and their business model are very different. So we have specialized software to deal with that. So that was my last question. There were some great ones that we didn't get to answer. Our email addresses are there on your screen. You know, feel free to pop us an email and ask your question privately, and we'll be happy to address it with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been our honor to have you in our audience today. As I said, we'll be doing this again next week, where we're going to talk a lot more specifically about embezzlement. So we'd love to have you back for that. And we'll make sure that we give you a couple of chances to join us for that. And enjoy the rest of your day. And I can't wait till the day when we all get back to doing what we do full time.